Welcome to part 3 of our Rochester Sentinel webcast interview with U.S. congressional candidate Jackie Walorski. On a more prosaic note, perhaps, how many access points on US 31 should there be in Fulton County after it goes limited access?
It depends on how many Fulton County needs. You know, as a state representative, I represent now St. Joe and Elkhart County and have fought hard and vigorously to keep the access points that we have and to make sure that we benefit the most, that our economies in St. Joe and Elkhart County can benefit at a maximum level with 31 and access points. Nobody's asked me that question from Fulton County. I don't know what the leaders of Fulton County have decided that they need.
Well, there's a fear we'll only get 3. One at each end of the county, north and south, and one here at Rochester. There are a lot of farmers who don't like that because they have to split their fields up.
Yep.
And a lot of people who work on the other side of the road don't want to have to drive.
Right. But I can tell you this, when those negotiations happen, it will be your state representatives and state senators that are going to be at the table. They're going to have to stand up and they're going to have to pound, which is exactly what I did in St. Joe and Elkhart County, to make sure and let me tell you, those access points have economic development written all over them. And we're already seeing that before those roads are even laid, the economic development at the access points. So it is paramount for economic development that state representatives work with the governor and get what they need for their community. It's huge. It's vital.
Should we be in Afghanistan?
Well, I wish we weren't. I wish we weren't involved in the war on terror. I wish there was no war on terror. But the reality is this. You know, we are in places all over this world because we were attacked and because planes flew into the World Trade Center. And my fear is this, that we have a president right now as a commander-in-chief. We have a Congress that seems to be pretty silent on this issue of national security. We have a commander-in-chief, and I was just talking about it on the radio when I came in here, that's treating enemies like friends and friends like enemies. We have a question right now as to whether we're standing with Israel, our greatest ally in the Middle East. We have issues with a general right now in Afghanistan. I think it's because we have a huge lack of leadership. We have a vacuum right now with what's happening with national security. We have a president that is not right now focusing on what's happening with national security, and we have turmoil in the field. But I wish we didn't have a war on terror, but we do. And the number one job of the President of the United States, per the Constitution of this country, is to protect Americans from foreign invasion and from domestic problems inside. And the job of the Congress is to fund that. And I think when we're talking about the number one rule of the Constitution being ignored, I think America's in peril.
Or we should be in Afghanistan?
If the war on terror has to be fought in the places where the war on terror is being birthed, we have to be there until the war on terror is defeated and this country is secure.
How would you define a victory in Afghanistan?
That we're no longer being attacked from the outside by terrorists.
What's your time frame on it? How long might that take?
I have no idea. I've never been there. I've never talked to General McChrystal. I'd love to talk to General McChrystal. I'd love to find out what the problem is. He asked for more troops. He hasn't received them.
He got 30,000.
He's asking for, you know, he's out there talking about the commander-in-chief and the perception of being weak, and I think he's just echoing what he's hearing from the people on the field. And I would say this, I am not a military professional or an expert, but I would listen to the commanders on the field. The commanders on the field are making the strategy. They're putting in peril and in jeopardy American men and women's lives every day. And if I'm going to empower those guys to make decisions as generals, I'm going to take their advice and give them what they need to get on top of this issue. But I'll tell you this, we've allowed ourselves as Americans to get involved in a politically correct world where we're not calling anybody an enemy, we're not calling radical jihad, we're not calling terrorists. We have a Janet Napolitano who went from a governor to a Homeland Security director that has, you know, that won't even talk about the war on terror. And there is a war on terror, and there are those that seek to destroy us. And the job of the government, instead of micromanaging every company on the face of this country's plateau, ought to be worried about making sure that we are secure within and without our borders, so that people can thrive, so that companies can thrive, and so we have a stable investment area. But I think this thing's going to spin out of control until we actually put somebody who wants to be in charge of this military in charge.
Please share your thoughts on the BP oil disaster. Are you satisfied with the company's response, with the federal response, and do you favor deep water offshore drilling?
I think, again, we're looking at a lack of leadership. And I was talking about that again just coming here on the radio, that, you know, I'm not sure anybody in this country knows who's in charge of this cleanup effort. I don't think anybody really knows, because there's been nobody taking charge. The president, you know, we're into the 60-some days now, and it wasn't like the first day that we saw a president of the United States flying down there and saying, at the end of the day, the buck will stop with me, I'm in charge, and we're going to get the best and brightest minds here, not professors and not, you know, the hierarchical, theoretical people. We're going to get people from other oil companies. Everybody's going to come together for the sake of this industry, and as professionals, we're going to solve this thing. Instead, we're 60-some days out now, probably greatest environmental disaster that I've seen in my lifetime because it's dwarfing the Exxon Valdez. And now we have the question today, you know, are we going to seize the assets of a foreign company? Are they actually going to be able to ever pay the tab? Will they ever be able to pay this bill? You don't even know because we're not even to the bottom of this thing yet. I just heard coming in here from ABC News that the robot that was down there today knocked the cap off, plugged the cap, and now they're going to have to go down and have, you know, a robot fix, and what they were siphoning off is not going to be siphoned off. All of these are symptomatic of no leadership. I was in D.C. a couple of weeks ago and talked to somebody from Exxon who'd never been contacted. Nobody from the other neighboring oil companies were even contacted to go to the table to make sure, number one, that there's a comprehensive solution so this never happens at anybody else's company. You'd think that would behoove us to make sure that if we're as dependent as we are on oil, that we would make sure that everybody's at the table, the best and brightest minds, and we would take ideas and put them out there. When Bobby Jindal, the governor, asked for barriers and berms to be put out there, and they looked at him like it was preposterous, why was it preposterous? He was just protecting his shoreline, a tourism industry and fishermen. Now we've allowed this to happen. I just saw where it popped up on the beaches of Pensacola, Florida this morning. Another industry, right in the middle of tourist season. I think it's lack of leadership. And I think you really don't know.
Lack of leadership on BP?
Lack of leadership from the President of the United States.
And what's BP's responsibility then?
I think they're extremely responsible. They're a foreign company. They're extremely responsible. But do I believe, in your third question here, in thwarting the efforts of drilling?
No, do you believe in continuing offshore drilling?
Absolutely.
Deep water offshore drilling?
I think we need to, in this country, explore every single possible way of domestic production of energy. And so that would be drilling, that would be wind, that would be solar, that would be some of the things we're doing right here in Indiana. But absolutely, do I believe we should shelve it? No. And I believe with the court decision that came down yesterday that says it's unconstitutional to tell private industry they cannot drill, they have to stop because of a president of the United States says they have to stop.
Seems that if he tells them to stop, he's voicing leadership, and if he doesn't do anything, he's not being leader.
No, I think
what could he do to make you happy?
Well, I think maybe 60 days ago, take complete charge of the decision making and complete charge of where the buck stops. You can't just say stop without a plan. What is the plan? Because you're not only hurting, you have a tourism industry and a fishing industry being completely devastated by this, and then you're telling another major industry that's our livelihood in this country to stop with no alternative. Stop. For how long? And by what authority?
6 months, I think he said.
Well, and by what authority? And what happens in the meantime? You know, and I think it's interesting. I think what is really interesting, I remember in 2006 when Joe Donnelly ran against Chris Chicola, I remember the issue that sunk Chris Chicola was the issue of energy, and it was oil. And George Soros and MoveOn.org came into this media market, and they spent probably $1.5 million with the red-handed wave of Chicola being on the take of oil money and the oil industry.
And you don't think it was that he was allied closely to the president who was very unpopular?
Time out. The reason Joe Donnelly won is because Joe Donnelly took those ads and ran on the issue that we have to do everything humanly possible, and he would do everything humanly possible as a congressman to get us off of foreign oil and to ensure domestic production. That guy hasn't filed one bill, one amendment, one peep of one voice in 4 years of what the heck to do to get us off of foreign oil and to ensure domestic production, whether it's wind, solar, drilling, not a peep, not a word. And here we are today with now a catastrophe and no policy whatsoever to develop domestic production of energy.
Are you prepared to defend federal farm subsidies?
I'm prepared to investigate federal farm subsidies. I have meetings coming up in the next couple of weeks in Logansport, in Delphi, farmers. I want to hear from farmers in this industry, whether they're farming hogs, whether they're farming cattle, whether they're farming corn, wheat, and soy in this state. I want to hear what federal subsidies mean to them. Because I'm hearing really mixed results. And I want to hear from the farmers. I want to know from the farmers about this issue.
Last question. We're going to get you out of here on time, Coach.
Man, you're good.
How religious are you?
Very.
You pray every day?
I do. My faith is the pinnacle of what I believe. It makes up who I am. And, you know, when I ran for the State House office for the first time, I knocked on probably 6,000 doors the first run and probably 10,000 doors in 2006. I will look people in the eye and tell them unapologetically, yes, I pray. I'm a woman of faith. I'm unapologetic pro-life. and pro-family. And if you don't like it and it bothers you, you don't have to vote for me. But I'm telling you, that's who I am.